manipulation of the Jenga game, shows, again, rightfully so, that humans do have an impact on the environment, right? And that there's a very real agency there. But it once again doesn't show the impact on human life. Like, how are we actually codependent with this natural world, right? It's still that kind of separation and that use of that agent object relationship. And also, to be clear, I'm not saying that, just purely trying to mitigate climate change just for love of the natural world or saving the natural world isn't laudable. I'm not arguing that, but more so that it's very important to emphasize the codependency so that people still see the real relationship between humans and the natural world, as opposed to thinking that this is just something that's happening to the environment, right? And that it doesn't really have anything to do with us. So I've talked about a few of their posters, and there are other posters that they use that have the same type of messaging as far as the human hand. Sorry. But there are a few ways, like I said, that I think they're impeding their communicative goal of encouraging people to engage in climate change mitigation or connecting with, that climate change is a serious issue. So they have this kind of distal viewpoint on the climate crisis. And this kind of contributes to a sense of sort of psychological distance, which is emotional or cognitive detachment from climate change. That agent-object relationship, which, like I said, it sort of hides the symbiotic and codependent relationship between humans and the natural world, and failing to foreground that what poses a threat to nature is also threatening to humans, so that we exist in this symbiotic relationship. Also, just repetition of the framing itself. My supervisor, Barbara Danziger, also looked into framing in environmental issues, and she has rightfully said that the Save the Planet frame is like so overused, right? It's kind of something that people can just kind of dismiss really easily, right? And I think we all have seen it so much that it is quite easy to dismiss it, unfortunately. So some suggestions I have for different framing: using images and text that are more specific rather than generic, reframing the ecological and human as, again, part of that symbiotic relationship. So still profiling human responsibility, but also emphasizing, the impact on nature and human life is one and the same. And also making the figurative depictions more emotionally salient. So it's not a matter of underplaying the agency or responsibility of humans. I want to make that clear. It's just about shifting the perspective about how we fit into this greater system. I think is really important. That sort of perspective of like being in a symbiotic kind of codependent relationship is something that's more expressed in Indigenous perspectives about the relationship between humans and the planet, and that's not something that's typically foregrounded in Western discourse. And so I think that those voices need to be brought in and also emphasized more, because they have a better sense of what our actual relationship is with the natural world as well. So this is just a quote from David Suzuki, and he was actually talking about how he learned so much from Indigenous perspectives about the relationship between humans and the earth, and was saying that what he has learned is that we are an inseparable part, right, of the earth. So we are no more removed from nature than any other creature, and even in the midst of a large city. And he says that he saw that environmentalists just like him, and David Suzuki is quite prominent in Canada, he said we had been framing the issue improperly. The notion of this like separateness and isolation was an illusion. So I'll move now to just some posters by Extinction Rebellion. This is a whole other interest of mine that I've presented about and also will be writing about more. And I don't have a ton of time to talk about them now, but they have very different framing, as you can see. I'm not saying I agree with all of the framing that Extinction Rebellion uses, and I also know that their tactics can be quite extreme. So I want to say at the offset, I'm not saying like, oh, Extinction Rebellion, like they're perfect, they really know what's up. That's not what I'm arguing at all. I'm pointing to the fact that they are using different framing that might be effective in different ways. So you can see how they have this human, right, and then there's this melting iceberg, but they're one and the same, right? So it's not like this distant iceberg that and then the glacial waters are rising, right? And it doesn't really seem to have any emotional salience, right? Humans and the iceberg are one and the same. And so this type of framing is most likely more useful, I think, than just having some sort of kind of like distal representation of like saving the planet. It's really showing what the impact is on human life and also on the planet, right? Like one in the same. And also, I think their use of the term extinction, right? It sort of puts humans on this kind of cline of living creatures, right? So, you know, humans can go extinct, right? Just like any other type of living creature, right? And so it kind of profiles like the primitive and vulnerable aspects maybe of humanity that people don't really like to think about, which is that we are so dependent on our environment. We like to think of ourselves as removed from it or too technologically advanced to be impacted by it, but that's actually not true, right? But they also use the term rebellion, which is, you know, it profiles a collaborative and organized kind of ideologically motivated nature of humans to like band together for a common cause. So I do think that there's useful things about their framing. And again, here, you know, they have this, you know, human skull, but also in the shape of foliage, and it says, what we are doing to the forest is but a mirror reflection of what we are doing to one another. So again, that framing of, you know, conflating the human and the natural world, right? The destruction of the natural world is the destruction of ourselves, and making sure to foreground that. So the ways that humans have engaged with the natural world, so focusing on extraction, profit, and gain, right, obviously have resulted in the current climate change challenges that we're faced with. And I think that communication, even though it's well-meaning, can sometimes kind of unintentionally have like reiterate maybe unhelpful ideological perspectives, right? So profiling that like bifurcation of humanity in the natural world. And seemingly different messaging can kind of have common underlying foundation. So obviously, like the earth is an object that we're taking care of versus like the earth is an object that we're exploiting are different ways of conceptualizing, but they do still have that underlying root of objectification and separation. And so I think just becoming more aware of like what sort of like underlying implicit perspectives are guiding the environmental communication is useful. We become habituated to them. We don't really think about them. And so they're not useful for that reason as well. So I think that, you know, while I haven't seen, you know, widespread environmental campaigns that I think are perfect in any way, shape, or form, I do think that, you know, I want to recognize the fact that they are trying to do, they have a very laudable goal. They're trying to do a really important thing. But sometimes the framing that they're using might not be as helpful as they are hoping or thinking it could be. But I think that like looking at the different ways that we framing things and becoming aware of it can, you know, open up the discussion for new ways of framing and being more intentional with the way that we're framing, you know, climate change mitigation, what our relationship is as well, and lead to a more hopeful way forward. Okay, thank you. Any questions?